Behind the scenes. So Greg Mitchell, people, welcoming Greg from Perth, Western Australia, the beautiful Western Australia, where I'm from as well. Now, Greg is one of the most experienced people on this online summit. Greg's a fantastic human being who I've personally known for a number of years. He started my journey with Smile Teachers and held my hand very closely for the first year and a bit. We're still very close. Someone who I look up to. We mentioned this morning that Dale has a lot of energy, but Dale's in his 30s. This guy's in his extreme 30s, as he likes to say. I won't say too much more, but Greg's worked with just about every type of student, teacher, parent, crazy ass psycho all over Australia. And he's got so many strategies to share, as you'll see in this session. Greg, I'll let you take it away with the Upstream Mindsets.
Thank you, and g'day everyone. My name's Greg Mitchell, and as you'll find out during this presentation, I suffer from enthusiasm. After 40 years of teaching, I still love the job, and every time I go to work, I believe I touch the future. Today, this is my first ever online presentation, so this is quite a challenge for me. And believe me, I'm looking here at the screen hoping that it's making sense to you. I've had a very good day to start the day, even though I'm in isolation. I've been on the front page of the paper today, and I might have to show you how, because if I hold up the paper here, this is the Australian paper, Australian-wide, and down here on the front, there's this picture of a school, because we're starting to come back to school now in Australia. But down the front of that, hang on, I've got to go the other way, right down here on the other side there's a book. And the book, I can't get my finger in the right spot. The book happened to be a book that I wrote over 30 years ago for little kids at school. And it's this one here. And who would have thought that it would have lasted and it would be on the front page of the paper today? Which goes to show you that some of the things that you do at school last longer than what you think. Today we're going to have a look at a concept which is fairly simple. It's called the Upstream Mindset. And the Upstream Mindset is part of a different look at mindsets that I've been engineering for at least the last 3 years, but with about 30 years of research behind it. The problem is most of the problems we deal with in school are dealing with stuff that happens now. We get used to doing what happens. And what happens when we do what happens is that we just wait for things to happen instead of dealing with what we need to look at. Today, I'm going to take you through the things that we need to prepare so we can cope with what the world throws at us. A different way of getting upstream from the problems instead of downstream and constantly trying to swim. I'm just going to swip over to full screen now so that I can show you my presentation to make it work through. So,
just click on your PowerPoint, Greg. Just go to your PowerPoint down the bottom.
So there we go.
Just go to your PowerPoint. Yep. There you go. You're good to go.
Cue that up to the top. And here we go. Usually at this time of the year, I'm not sitting in front of a camera smiling at you, but I'm up to my armpits with school starting back. Because what I want them to imagine is, what does it look like when you start again? Every term is the beginning of something new, a chance to do something fabulous, a chance to do good stuff. And the Upstream Mindset works kind of like this. But one of the biggest things that I do at this time of the year is to make sure that everybody who comes back to school is greeted. And so usually I'd be saying to you, just put your hands in the air like this and reach over to the people on either side of you and pat them on the back and say, it's good to see you today. But seeing we're a little remote, I thought, well, I'll just have to do the vision of it and just get you to reach out and shake hands to each other. But perhaps if you'd like to just swivel around on your chair a bit, there you go. Turn right around, and did you feel that? That was me reaching out and just patting you on the back, because thank you for turning up today. people find different ways to do things when they're in lockdown, and I love this one from the States of this couple. The gentleman on these two were going to Paris about 2 weeks ago, apparently to have a great holiday, but he had a secret. He was going to propose, and as you know, in world travel has slowed down and stopped completely. So instead of going to Paris, he had to find a wall in his hometown, and he drew Paris. There's the Eiffel Tower and the L'arc de Triomphe there. And he invited his girlfriend down, and he proposed. She's extremely happy. And this, I think, makes it actually more memorable because of the problems. Because often it's the problems which make us much more successful at dealing with the futures. And when we have a look at this, I proposed over 45 years to a beautiful woman, 45 years ago to a beautiful woman, and I still love her with all my heart. And it's interesting that we have to make things memorable for kids, things that stick, make them work. Here's some guys practicing social distancing in wrestling. Have you seen social distance wrestling? It goes like this.
I'm laughing.
It's that chance to work it through. The trouble is that the systems that we've got at the moment are constantly in change, but we've got to remember that every system is perfectly designed to create the results that it gets. And what happens is you'll find in your schools and in your places of work and the things that we do constantly, the things that annoy us are actually designed by the school itself, because we create the system that makes us work. And we also create the system that doesn't work. Put up your hand and wave if you've got a kid in your class who doesn't do as well as they should. Who's got some kid who doesn't follow directions very well? Who's got a stream of kids who constantly get into trouble? Who's got some teachers who are not nice to work with sometimes? Who's got a boss who does a staff meeting just for themselves and you only turn up as the audience? These are systems that constantly turn up all the time. And what we have to look at is how do we change the system? And the system is started usually quite young, because that's when we figure out who our heroes are and what we want to be. If I ask most kids who are their heroes usually turn out to be things like football players and people who save people. In Australia, it's been bushfire people. And at the moment, during this virus that changes everything, it's all about healthcare workers and stuff like that. But the trouble is when we think about being upstream, we need to think about what can we do to stop having the heroes who have to save people, but start being the heroes that prevent those things from happening. The key with this is most of the time when we think about our heroes, we have heroes like lifesavers who are trying to pull things out. There's a story in the book Upstream by Dan Heath, which is a fabulous read. I think you should get hold of it. But he talks about this old parable of two guys walking by the river and finding a child thrashing around in the river. So they strip off and dive in and pull the kid out. And they put him on the side and he's fine. And then another kid comes floating down, screaming and yelling. So they save that kid. And then they put that kid on the side, and then another one comes down. And they keep doing the same until one of them says, look, you just do the best you can. I'm going upstream to see who's throwing these kids in the first place. The trouble is when we see what happens is most of our research are like lifeguards. They're trying to prevent stuff. Most of the time when we're looking at teaching, we're not thinking about what would be the best thing to teach. We're thinking about these are the things that we have to teach because those are the system. They're the curriculum. They're the things that are in place. And when we look at those things, we really need to think of things differently. I don't think that lifeguards are really bad people. I think they're excellent and they should be heroes. They perform a really great thing. But sometimes we've got to look at different heroes like Bernard Markowitz. This is not really Bernard Markowitz, but he was somebody who looks at things differently, just like this model does. because he was the hero who invented these things, which are called water wings. And water wings prevent so many kids from drowning every year. They're not great in the surf, but they're excellent at teaching kids how to swim in a pool. And when we look at these, if you've ever taught a child how to swim, they just give them that extra confidence to get them to work through. That's what we call an upstream hero. Most of us don't even think about the upstream heroes, the people who save lives because they came up with a concept first up. They're not the ones that usually end up on the front page of the papers. But we need to teach people how to get upstream too, because we're not all very good at swimming. We need to think about people like, perhaps they're like otters. Do you know that otters can sleep on their back in water? But when they sleep on their back in water, they hold hands so nobody drifts away. And the key thing for us is that we have many kids who drift away because we haven't taught them the skill that keeps them to be attached even when they're away from us. And so we end up with depressed otters, even though they're supposed to be the happiest animal in the world. Which means we really shouldn't think about these things. We've got to start thinking about a long way back and how we prepare kids for the world. And most of it depends upon how we see things, our perceptions. Which of these circles in these 5 rectangles here, which of them is the darkest? Pretty simple. They're all the same. But they look very dark because the background of what we do changes everything and how we see stuff. Have a look at these squares here, these crosses here. Which is the most of them? Are they black or are they white? But if we look at them closely, you'll notice that with changes happening, you'll find that sometimes they're black and sometimes they're white. And we've got to think those things through. This is a pretty good modelling about what coding does as well, by the way. And we've got to see that often what we think is facing one way is not. Which way is this fish facing? Most of us would say left. But if we look really closely at it, you'll find that it actually is part of a model that looks both ways, left and right. Our perception is critical. And the way we look at things looks like, when we look at this, that this is totally bent, but it's not. If we look at this closely too, you'll see that it changes shape according to where those 2 little squares are in those rectangles there. And as they move, it changes our perception. The world has changed rapidly, and our perception of teaching needs to change as well. And the key things we've got to look at when we look at our perception is to make sure we see what's really there, just like Honda proved in this ad.
Let's do those things that can't be done. Like less fuel in for more miles out. And impossible made possible.
If we are going to make the impossible stay possible, we've got to learn how to look at things differently. If you look at this X-ray here, you'll find that there's something quite obviously wrong with it. Who notices the gorilla in the X-ray? This was a test done with about 30 odd radiologists by Harvard. The radiologist's job is to look at those lungs and to see where the polyps arrange, because this is where cancer is caused. And when you're looking closer, you are looking closely for those, you would think that they would see that gorilla, but that's not where they look. They look down at the ventricles there. And when they're looking at those ventricles, they've missed it. Would you believe that out of 20 out of 24 had what they called inattentional blindness. They were unable to see that ape, even though to us it stands out. This happens in schools all the time. The behaviour management system that has lots of kids sent to the office regularly. The kids who you can predict who are going to not succeed before we even start. The systems that don't work that we persist with, even though we know they're not working. And if we're going to change that, we've got to look at some things differently. I'm going to give you a set of figures here from a set of Australian students. I want you to think about what year levels or what group of students would have these figures. What year group do you think this is? What do you think? Just jot it down.
Greg, you've got in the chat year 9, year 12. We've got a few other guesses.
The scary part is that this is 10,000 Australian university students.
Okay.
That will shock the pants off you. These are our successful students who we are preparing for a world that they cannot cope with. And the difficulty is with it is that this is from Headspace, and the problem is with this is that this is inattentional blindness. We're looking at their marks and we're not looking at their mental health. And the difficulty is that they're the successful kids. And this is why we need to get upstream and teach them the mindset maneuver. This is one of my favourite photos in the whole world. This guy on a shoot kite, upside down, having a drink. That's the mindset maneuver. Thinking about what you can do totally differently. And the mindset maneuver starts by understanding what our mindsets are. I believe that there are not just two mindsets. I think that the world has been told that there's a fixed mindset and a growth mindset, but I think there's more than just that. In fact, I know that there are two more. Our work together in Smile Teachers has shown us that not just the fixed and the growth mindset are there, but beyond that, there's the benefit mindset. This is the mindset that's missing for many people in this current crisis. And over that, there's an executive mindset called the universal mindset, which uses all three of those to grow healthy, intelligent, problem-solving, capable people. When we look at how we set these up, it starts with birth. And I'm going to talk you through these three mindsets as a developmental set of mindsets. Most of the time we think about the fixed and the growth mindset as two separate entities that seem to be at war with each other, which has been promoted by the research of Carol Dweck. But I think she stopped too soon. I think there are those two mindsets, but I don't think they're all of them. And we notice that from birth and early on, the first mindset you have is, how do I get people to obey me? If you've had any contact with a baby lately, you'll know that they're very magnetic and they have that ability to grow really quickly too. Who notices that their children have just seemed to move on so quick from where they are? Who's had their children in the last month teach them more than they knew themselves about how media works and how that works along with us? When we look at these things, we don't know what the effect of how we teach them has and what are the things that scare them under the bed. But the outcomes, if we look at those previous figures, are very scary. We don't know what the effect of all of these crises and problems and screens and all of those things are going to have on this current generation of kids. But what we do know is that people who reach old age often are their happiest after their 60s. Me, I'm in my extreme 30s, as Sean said. I'm 68 at the moment, and I am still happy as I could ever be. In fact, I'm happier now than I've ever been in my life, even though in the last month I've gone from full-time employment to work coming to you from my spare room. But there's still things that I can do which are valid and worthwhile. This photo is from a set of photos called 100 Years Old and Happy. Who would like to look that good when they're 100 years old? I bet you they're not his own teeth, but perhaps that's why he's happy. When we look at what makes children happy, what makes children happy is their ability to work together. But we also know the child, it becomes the adult as well. And sometimes we look at it as teachers, our parents, and think, gee, your kid looks a lot like you. These are fabulous photos which transpose the parent's face on the child's body and vice versa. When we look at what makes us successful as an adult, it's kind of interesting. You get a window in this when you do this little activity called 2 on a crayon, which I do with 4-year-old kids. If I had you in my workshop now, I'd get you to pair up and put one crayon between the two of you and one piece of paper between the two of you. And then I'd ask you to draw a picture. The weird thing is normally when I say to draw a picture to adults, they don't even talk. One of them just grabs the pen and starts drawing. And then I say, change, give the crayon to your partner. And that person has to use that crayon to keep the picture going. And most people draw pretty weird things. If I asked you to draw stuff, I bet you I'd get a flower or a single bedroom dwelling, a house on a hill with a tree, occasionally cars and occasionally a Picasso work. But most of the time when little kids do it, you can see at different stages they do wonderful things. 0 to 2-year-olds draw whatever the big person wants. 2 to 4-year-olds often draw a line down the middle and say, that's your side and that's my side, and draw two totally different things. And when you ask them, what did you draw? They'll say, I drew, because the other person's not even in the picture. When they turn 4 to 8, they actually start to see the other kid and they start to parallel play. So we get a lot of pictures then which are almost symmetrical. And the symmetrical pictures are kind of interesting because there'll be one heart on one side and another heart on the other side. There'll be two of everything. And when you ask them what they drew, they'll say in chorus, we drew something. And then after that age, if they've shared a lot and they've had lots of play and lots of chances to see other people, they move on to drawing one picture together. And when you say, what did you draw? They'll say, we drew, but then they differentiate. They say, I drew this bit and she drew that bit, but this is what we drew together. That conceptual development, I believe, gives us an insight into how mindsets should develop. When we look at the mindsets, these are the simplest things that every kid should learn. This is research which I got through Nathan in New Zealand, and it's an American piece of research which looked at 4-year-old kids. This was a checklist that their teachers did within about 15 seconds for each kid. Very simple to say whether a kid does this or not. But 20 years later, when they collected up the results of what happened to 800 odd kids, they found that children who could do this were 4 times more likely to get a degree, and much more likely to have a full-time job and a full-time relationships. And kids who couldn't do this were much more likely to have, I love the way they worded it, negative interactions with law enforcement. The trouble is that we can predict very early on what is going to make kids emotionally successful, yet we don't teach it. And part of that is not understanding who we are. This is a really good start. If you're struggling with the virus and self-isolation, just pop this on and see how you feel.
And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue, clouds of white, the red of day, and the dark sky night. And
Yep. Who's tearing up a little bit? It's absolutely beautiful. When we think about what happens in our children, in this 0 to 2 age group from birth, the fixed mindset sets up a lot of things. This is the positive fixed mindset where it's my job to get my needs met. And where we're getting our needs met, we want to think it through. When we think about how do babies get their needs met, well, to start with, they're very beautiful and very attractive. And you can't help but want to help them. But they're also very demanding. Put up your paw if you're a mammal. Anybody who's a mammal suffers from anxiety because at this stage, this is when first you stress your parents out by sucking the living daylights out of them. They want you 24/7 and you have to provide for it. The trouble is for our parenting is that our children are hardwired to attract our attention and they get very good at demanding it. They're codependent. In other words, their major job at this stage is how do I make giants obey me? And this lasts from about birth to age 2. And how it happens is that when this happens, they are hardwired to attract your attention. This little boy has no arms and no legs. But when a baby cries, he knows exactly what to do. Isn't that gorgeous? And what that is that baby able to teach us how to get their needs met. And the fixed mindset about getting our needs met all the time is a really brilliant thing because it helps kids get that confidence to be who they are. But then there's a problem because the next step is that when we move from our fixed mindset where we learn everything one-on-one in a dyad and that we have everything with a relationship, what happens with that is if we understand our relationships with kids, we can teach them very well. Most kids who struggle in your education system are kids who have not developed that one-on-one relationship. They haven't developed that chance to work together with someone very closely to get their needs met. Watch this doctor. This doctor is a genius. He knows that his job is to immunise kids. And I don't think too many of us would like that job. Who would like the job of sticking needles into babies? Here, this doctor is immunising this child, but he knows that if he can build a relationship with this kid, he can do it much easier. And he'll know when he's got that relationship when he gets eye contact with the child. Watch the baby. And there's the relationship. Now he's got that. He's desensitizing the child to the syringe. And look at his right hand. He's preparing the target site. Here it comes.
Are you kidding me?
Who wants this doctor? What a wizard. What that is understanding the developmental stage and the mindset and how to work with it. This is what we need to do with each of our developmental levels. These mindsets are repeated again in teenage years. Who's noticed that year 6 and 7s are very pathetic and very codependent and want to know what to do all the time? But what happens is after this, and we get used to meeting all their worst needs and all of the terrible things that happen, babies change. There's an impact on the world. and the world changes with them, and they develop a growth mindset. If you've got access to a 2 to 4 year old, you'll know they are freaking monsters. They are designed to separate from you. And this is where the first of the great anxiety comes. This is when the first great anxiety is separation anxiety, where kids want to hang on to that baby stage where all of their needs are met. But they also have to meet the needs of the world. And the need of the world is that they're designed to separate, to leave the pack, to push away. This is why they get horrible. They start to throw tantrums. They start to become some of the most evil people on the planet. They start to realise their parents are different. And so watch this, Dad. This is 2:51 on a Saturday when you're in isolation with the baby and there's nothing else to do.
I see you mobbing over her. Let's go. Let's mob. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Hey, yo, we mobbing. Come on, girl. Let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl.
You could see that baby knew that Dad was stupid, but she went along with it. But what happens in a very short period of time, that changes. And what happens is you'll find kids now do not want to cooperate. They want to get their own way. They want to become independent. They want to battle, and they've got no morals whatsoever in this. They will do whatever it takes to get whatever I want. Watch these two kids in the pit, and the baby's starting to crawl out on the beam. Mum's egging the baby on until the 2 to 4 year old turns into a monster.
Get him, Maverick! Get him! Get him, Maverick! 2 points for Quinn! Quinn!
Did you hear Mum then? Quinn! Well, that's what 2 to 4 year olds do. They get into this battle where not only where they're very, very, very schizophrenic. There's a part where they love you totally and they want to be with you all the time, and there's another part where they hate you. This is repeated again when they're 14 to 16 years old, when they want to separate from you and they don't want to do what you're told. If you teach year 9s and 10s, you'll understand this completely. These are the world's biggest monsters. They put independence first. And what happens is that they see, but in 14 to 16 year olds, it changes from trying to please parents into trying to please friends. And their independence is that separation stage. And it lasts for 2 to 4 years, depending upon how much play and how much work they've got. The trouble is it's very image driven, and the image driven is imprinted on kids from their very birth. This is a very scary but amusing little clip. At 2 to 4 year old, the image becomes that I can do anything. And we become icebergs. If I drew you as an iceberg and your school as an iceberg, it would look like this. There's that 10% of you, which is your image, which sits above the water. The trouble is with this image is that most of it's pretty fake. Image is all about how do I look and what can I do? What can I be seen as? The trouble is with it is that it doesn't look at what matters. Often this is a kid's grades. And as you know, who knows a ripper kid, a fabulous child who's got lousy grades? And who knows a kid who's got great grades and thinks they're wonderful, but you really struggle with them? The trouble is with the image is that we get caught on all sorts of little weird images, what we look like, where we're from, what our race is, all of these things. This is only 10% of us. But the biggest part to educate for all of us is the bit that's below the surface, that real self, the stuff that you don't see. For most children, for most teenagers, particularly in that 14 to 16-year-old age group, if you knew me as I really am, you wouldn't like me, so I'll pretend to be someone else. And the self becomes submerged. And the trouble is this is the real self. This is where your hopes and your dreams and your emotions and your wishes and desires live. But most of the times we don't share that. It's only 89% of you though. And those of you who are with a mathematical bent will notice that there's 1% that's missing. And the 1% is missing is the stuff that starts to grow during this time of the fixed mindset, of the growth mindset. And the trouble with the growth mindset is often it's driven by fear. If your goals are not the goals of your real self, you'll find that there's a 1% shark that turns up who notices the blood in the water and it stops you from being your real self. You'll say, oh, I should go over and talk to that person over there. No, better not. They'll think I'm stupid. I should wear this dress. Oh, no, it's the wrong colour. It's the stuff that drives us constantly. And the fear issue is always there. It's only 1% of it that suits us up. And the fear comes from what our images are. For our boys, often they're locked into that masculine box of who they should be. And that masculine box I call the alarm box, which is the act like a real man box. In Australia, and I'm sure it's true in many other states and in many other countries, it's the babes, the balls. If you're good at sport, somehow you're more of a man. The bills, if you've got lots of money, and the battles that make you more of a man. And the worst day of most young boys' lives is when they're told to be a man and grow up, because that implies that you're not one yet. For girls, it's the perfect feminine flower. And the perfect feminine flower is making sure that you're perfect in body and presentation and everything that we do. For teachers, it's running the perfect lessons and marking everything and staying up nights and days to make sure that you hand in your marking on time and get everything done and make sure it's perfect, and then feeling really bad that we haven't got it perfect the whole time. It's the feminine. It's making sure our bodies are perfect. And the problem is with the perfection in bodies, it brings in a whole load of eating disorders and people who don't like who they are. 80% of Australian females admit to wishing that they could change part of their body, even to the point of surgery. And finally, it's that issue of family, the family problem, that to be a real person that you somehow have to have a relationship, and it's got to be a perfect relationship and have the perfect family. These just make us stressed. And they're all part of that growth mindset where we're trying to grow too fast, when we attach our goals to the wrong pushing through. And whilst it's got positive stuff which teaches us the grit, it also teaches us to separate from other people. It teaches us that we don't need other people and that we should just be reliant totally ourselves. That's not always good for us. We need a mixture of both the fixed and the mindset to be healthy, good people. And that separation drives you crazy, because when you've got two children of your own, the sibling rivalry drives you insane. Put up your hand if you have ever told your children, you children are driving me insane. This is the problem, because that separation at this stage drives that problem, and it drives us towards goals which may not always be good for us. When we look at the things that are good for us, the best thing to learn through this is the ability to be good at survival, to push through, to learn that you have the ability to do things. This is Jocko Willink. He's an ex-Navy SEAL from the US, who's a motivational expert. This is his simple talk about how to get through. And this is what we should learn from the growth mindset.
One of my direct subordinates, one of my guys that worked for me, he would call me up or pull me aside with some major problem, some issue that was going on. And he'd say, boss, we got this and that, the other thing. And I'd look at him and I'd say, good. And finally one day he was telling me about some issue that he was having, some problem. And he said, I already know what you're going to say. And I said, well, what am I going to say? He said, you're going to say good. He said, that's what you always say. When something is wrong and going bad, you always just look at me and say good. And I said, well, yeah, when things are going bad, there's going to be some good that's going to come from it. Didn't get the new high-speed gear we wanted? Good. Didn't get promoted. Good. More time to get better. Oh, mission got canceled? Good. We can focus on another one. Didn't get funded. Didn't get the job you wanted. Got injured. Sprained my ankle. Got tapped out? Good. Got beat? Good. You learned. Unexpected problems? Good. We have the opportunity to figure out a solution. That's it. When things are going bad, don't get all bummed out, don't get startled, don't get frustrated. If you can say the word good, guess what? It means you're still alive. It means you're still breathing. And if you're still breathing, well, now you still got some fight left in you. So get up, dust off, reload, recalibrate, re-engage, and go out on the attack.
Interesting little clip, this one, because it talks about that simple persistence, that simple grit that we should get. But it also tells us the start of the benefit mindset. The benefit mindset comes from Ash Buchanan from Melbourne, who was building multi-million-dollar office places and buildings for people to work in. But finding that when you put people into a multi-million-dollar space, which is open and designed for people to work together, that they would make their own little nooks and crannies and hide away and build walls and just work by themselves. And he needed to get beyond the growth mindset, where the people weren't trying to compete, that they were trying to cooperate and work together. That little test that I did with 2 on a crayon early on, the next test that I do with 4 to 6-year-old kids to see what mindset they've got is where I put a piece of Play-Doh, just one blob, between 2 of them and say, I want you to make something together. And what happens is they do a very simple thing that you've seen a million times. First, they fight to see who's going to get hold of the big blob to start with. And then they share it. But they share it by breaking it into 2 separate halves. And the problem is by breaking it into 2 separate halves, then they just go off on their own way. We've called this sharing for a long time. This is like I just get my toilet paper and run away. This is like the panic buying of all time. As long as I get what I need, I'm happy. The trouble is with this concept of sharing is that it's not benefit-based. At the end of whatever they make with it, and I ask them the same question, what did you make? They'll say, we made, sometimes. But most of the time they'll say, I made. But at the end of it, I make them put the Play-Doh together in one blob on the tile or the sheet of paper that's in front of them. And that's when the fist fights break out. Because we've never taught sharing, that sharing is when you give up what you have for someone else. If you can find a man, all the females listening who wish to marry a man, marry that one. The one who's learned that to get things, you have to give up things. In the midst of the virus that changes everything, surely this is the biggest skill we've had to learn, to give up our own freedom so that we all can live. This is a big challenge, but nobody has taught us the mindset. At the moment, you'll see whole nations fighting to get beyond the safeness of living in a benefit relationship and trying to get back to the growth mindset. Got to get business started. Got to get the games played. Got to get those image-based stuff going because that's what validates them. Instead of looking at what can we do to grow and change. For kids developmentally, this starts to happen when you start to lose teeth and find friends. It's around about that 5 to 8-year-old time frame. And it teaches you interdependence. This is hopefully what I call the trauma of teamwork. This is usually when students are coming to school, learning how to separate and leave mum and dad for the first time, and learning how to do things by themselves, but also work together. And there's a paradox in this, the ability to give up so that you learn more. The trouble is with this area is that we have to learn teamwork. It's not a natural. If you've got children of your own, you'll notice that, yes, sometimes they cooperate, but most of the time they're competing for a scarce resource, which is called your attention. Teamwork has to be taught, and it's done through experience and play. The research by Thomas Boyce into anxiety shows that the two types of students when it comes to anxiety, there's the dandelion kids who seem to get by no matter what, and there's the orchid kids who need support. And learning how to play and how to be provoked and how to be protected and how to have structure and work in a team is all part of that stuff. The weird thing is that if you put enough structure and teamwork around the orchids, that they grow up to be much more resilient than the dandelions who are brought up by their bootstraps. The interesting thing about this is that we've never got upstream enough to teach our kids those and to structure stuff. And the best teams learn how to go forward by rowing backwards. The best teams work when they're doing something that puts themselves at risk but saves other people's lives. The best teams work when we learn that we've got resources to give each other and that we have other things that work together. This is the benefit mindset. When we look at the benefit mindset as it happens in the school, this is a really interesting upstream example. This comes from PS22 in New York. This is a very poor school. And thanks to virtually a graduate music teacher, they came up with a concept that at age 10, that these kids would learn how to sing in a choir. And the choir would be a choir of that sang music that mattered to them. And their fabulous music director decided that if they could do arrangements of a great song, they could invite the person who sang that song when they visited New York to come and sing with them. He's done this with lots of people. This song is Andy Grammer. Andy Grammer is a great performer, but he has never sung with these kids before. What they do is just put him out the front with a video cam on and the kids behind in the school assembly hall, and they get a chance to sing together. And the aim is to do it in one take. The kids have had rehearsal, Andy's had rehearsal, but this is the first time they've ever done it together.
I will fight for you. I always do until my heart is black and blue. And I will stay with you. We'll make it to the other side like lovers do. I'll reach my hand out in the dark and wait for yours to interact with you. I'll wait you. 'Cause I'm not giving up. I'm not giving up, no, not yet. Even when I'm down on my last breath, even when they say there's nothing left. So don't give up. I'm not giving up. I'm not giving up, no, not yet. Even when nobody else believes, I'm not going down that easily. So don't give up. Oh, I hold on to you. No matter what this world throws, won't shake me. I'll reach my hands out in the dark and wait for your soon until I have you. I'll wait for you. 'Cause I'm not giving up. I'm not giving up, no, not yet. Even when I'm down my life, even when they say there's nothing left. So don't give up. I'm not giving up. I'm not giving up, no, not me. Even when nobody else believes, I'm not going down that easy. So don't give up. I will fight. I will fight for you. I always will. Until my heart is black and blue. Yeah. I don't know, when we cry, I apologize. This song is singing. I want to hear what he's saying. I think for my mom also. You guys brought me to tears. Thank you so much. That was really, really special. Your voice is so good. How old are you all? It sounds like I'm being over the top, but this was one of my favorite days of my life. It really, really. Whoa! Really was.
Isn't that beautiful? If you need a tissue, grab one now. That is a beautiful look at two things, because the biggest thing that comes out of that is, one, that's the upstream mindset. They teach those kids at age 10 how to be successful and extremely successful. PS22 has sung at the Oscars. They've sung with a whole range of different people all over the world. You name the great singers that have ever been to New York, they've sung with most of them. And every year they turn over, because what happens is they teach their kids how that self-actualization and esteem feels before the next rush of the mindsets comes through, before the next rush of hormones changes them through that sequence that works it through. It's preventative medicine. The basic thing for all of this is to make sure you get those needs met. It's also the benefit mindset. Did you hear Andy say that was the best day of one of the best days of his life? Because by giving of yourself, you get to get the things that matter. We don't teach this very well in our schools. We don't teach kids how to be part of the planning, how to be part of the people who to set those goals and work it through. And that's probably because we need to have that mindset maneuver well and truly in our planning long before we start to teach students, and long before we think about how we can apply this to our classroom. When we think about a mindset maneuver, it's about being able to select the right mindset at the right time. This gives us executive function, the elegant ability to use the right mindset at the right time. And this is what makes you an adult. When we have a look at what makes us an adult, we have a universal mindset where we're absolutely aware that we have these three capabilities in amongst ourselves, and that each one of these has different things that goes with it. That sometimes you have to be codependent. If my car breaks down, I'm absolutely pathetic. My car is so bad that when they stole it, they brought it back better. But if it breaks down, I've got to call someone and I've got to be pathetic and help somebody work it through. This morning, I had to call on my beautiful wife to do a dummy run of this workshop so that I could have her just tell me that I was good enough, and to make sure that all sorts of wonderful things happened, like the curtains got put up and the colours were right. She even made me a cup of tea and a sandwich so that I'd get through it. And I appreciate that, and that's why I love her. But also, I have to be independent too. I have to sit here in front of you, scared as all hell because it's the first time I've done this, and hope that I don't look stupid. And sometimes I've got to give things up. I've got to share things with other people. Sometimes I have to do things that I don't want to do, but because it's for a greater good, I do it. These are the mindsets we need to teach our students. It's also the mindsets we need to learn ourselves. When we look at these mindsets, it's learning what mask do we wear at the right time. Which way do we see danger, and how can we save ourselves, not just others, from doing things? And make sure that the mask that we do wear, like the mask of our gender or the mask of our intelligence, actually hold us back from being who we are, and that we're actually living in that 1% land of the shark instead of truly being ourselves. We got to realise that if we work together, it doesn't matter what race or where we're from, we can actually learn to do great things. I've been amazed during this COVID crisis how in Australia we've had a national cabinet which is made up of all the state premiers and the Prime Minister, all of different shades of politicalness, and they actually work together and praise each other without trying to score points. It's a breath of fresh air. That, I would believe, is easy to get as sending someone to Mars. But one day we'll get to Mars, and one day we'll get a place where people learn how to lead together. It's where we investigate and look at the things that we see through children's lenses. I believe that the greatest leadership will happen in our schools when our students are part of the planning, when they are actually great teachers. There's a plan in New York called PERC, which is I've forgotten the words. It's pupil engaged. I've forgotten it. But where it teaches kids from the year before in mathematics, so the year 11 students teach year 10 mathematics to the year 10 students because they've just been through it and they help things work. What they've found is amazing things, because what happens is, one, year 10 students still learn mathematics as well from their peers as they do from their teachers, especially if their teacher is part of organising the teaching. And then secondly, that all of the minority kids keep going instead of learning. And thirdly, they've found that the kids who do the teachings, mathematical concepts, improve out of sight, and so they perform much better in year 12. What happens for us is that we need to involve them as part of the journey, and to give them more than a voice, to make them part of the leadership team and work together with it, to grow, to make things work, instead of trying to paddle the same old canoe in places that don't work, hoping that they're going to be dragged along. This is where the universal mindset teaches us everything, which teaches us how to change our questions from not the image of what you want to be, but to what do you want to have when you grow up. Everybody wants to have someone who loves them. Everybody wants to have a job which validates who they are and does good things. Everybody wants to have the chance to form great relationships and to do something that matters. These should be what drives us, not our marks and our grade, and whether we look good or whether we're the best or the first. What should drive us is the ability to make that shark be there, but nowhere near as dangerous. It means we need to develop the grace to gain mastery of our own life. And this should last from now until we die. And let's face it, we all seem extremely mortal at the moment. Having the grace to master our own life means that we become graceful, that we're able to do the most with the least. We become elegant, where we are graceful, no matter who we are or what shape we could be. And when we fail to maneuver, we become disgraceful. We become people who need to think about, what mindset do I need at the moment? Do I need to be codependent? Do I need to be independent? Do I need to be interdependent? And have I had the experience of each one to choose the right one at the right time? Because we all can be disgraceful or disgraceful. Please teach this man his benefit mindset. We need to learn how to connect. One of the things you miss out from just getting me online is that you don't get a chance to take place in lots of hands-on activities and chances to work together. I have this great little strategy, which is called an energy stick, which you probably might be able to see at the little small bit at the bottom. But I'll show you how this connects. When I come back to the full screen at the end. When we have a look at the possibilities, the ability to raise kids so that they are full of happiness most of the days of their lives is probably a pipe dream. But to be proud of ourselves at the end of each day, to be able to say, I did this well and I had some happiness along the way, is a great thing. And you'll know when it happens, because just like Andy Grammy will say, this is one of the best days of my life. I'm going to finish with my little effort at writing. I hadn't written the story much, pretty much since I'd written those little reading books 30-something years ago for kids. But during the break, seeing I went from flying 37,000 kilometres in the first 2 months of this school year to doing none in the last month, I thought that I needed to enjoy being who I am and what I do. And one of the things I remember was the joy of creating something cool, a story for kids. So here's my most recent kids story that I've written and illustrated. Please be gentle. I've been out of practice on both of these for a while. But I wrote this with New York in mind, even though I live in Perth, which is about as far away from New York as you can get and still be on the planet. But I wondered what it would be like to be there locked away with people dying around you, and to come up with something that would cheer you up a little bit. This is called One Heart, and it uses music from 1924, an old jazz number which has been reorganised by Ross Bogdan as a rights-free online piece of music. See how you like it. And that is all I have for you today. Let's get me out of here so I can talk to you full time.
Give Greg a magnificent round of applause.
Greg, that was incredible. Wow, mate, you are a champion.
Greg, you can't see the comments because you closed your chat, but as always, great presentation. Best presentation I've seen in years. Truly beautiful, Greg. Excellent presentation. Loved every minute.
Thank you. I'm stuck. I'm trying to find my way out of here. Hang on a sec. Here we go.
And for everybody that's listening at home, Greg won't mind me sharing this, but Greg's actually dyslexic. So creating a lot of that language is very challenging for him. So having worked with him for almost 3 years now, spell check and grammar check. I'm proud of you, Greg. I'm really proud of you because
I try
to perfect.
I try to remove as many words as possible from my presentation because it takes me too long to read them, and so. But I'm more
creating.
And if anybody wants that little book, it's online at if you go onto YouTube and put in Greg Mitchell One Heart, you'll find it somewhere there. That'd be great. And I'd really appreciate people sharing that around.
It looks like Sean's frozen there, Greg. He's got a nice look on his face. That was brilliant, mate. Thanks so much, Greg.
Am I back?
There you go. That's better. You got to move around a bit. I hope that was up to standard for